Hey, Jamie here, and welcome to Module 6, Part 1, where we're going to start diving into the personal branding. And specifically in Part 1, we're going to talk through how do you set up your personal brand, and then once you have it set up, then you can actually go about communicating it, which is going to be first, initially through written communication. So the resume, the LinkedIn cover letter. So in this first part, we're going to understand how strategic positioning directly influences your first impression, and we're going to talk about why the first impression is so important. We're also going to understand how your first impression, your personal brand, as well as reference stacking determines your subjective value in the marketplace. And if you remember from the case study from Module 5 on Dove, subjective value is super, super important. And then we're finally going to understand how to go about creating your hook statement and the 3 value propositions for your target audience, which really form the basis of your personal brand. And think of personal brand as your professional reputation. So in order to start with, I want to use some examples. So when you see this logo, what comes to your mind? Several things that might come to your mind are sports or athletics apparel or professional athletes or very high quality, something like that. Competition, sponsorships. Now, what comes to your mind when you see this? Now, a lot of people have different reactions when they see the McDonald's logo. So some people immediately think of obesity and very negative traits, whereas other people think of long distance road trips, convenient food, off the side of the highway. Now, what happens when you see this logo? What comes to your mind? A lot of people think technology, phones, laptops, creative, design friendly, very intuitive based, easy to use, user friendly, beautiful experiences, etc. So now what happens when you see this? What comes to your mind? Now, if you're like most people, one of the first things that come to your mind is BP oil spill. And the reason that's so impactful is now, because of that experience, because of that reference that we have in our mind, whenever we see this, that's the first thing that comes to our forefront of our mind. Well, yes, BP had to pay billions in environmental damage, but they lost so much more value just because of the damage to their reputation, because people became conditioned so that whenever they saw this logo, that was one of the first things that they thought of. So if they're driving down the road and there's one gas station on the right that's a BP or another gas station on the left that's some other company, instinctively people were actually going to the other gas station because even subconsciously when they saw the BP logo, they were thinking BP oil spill, which they didn't approve of. So that's one instance of how important a brand, a reputation is in driving consumer behavior. But now what happens when you see this logo? What do you think of? What kind of people do you think of? How smart or dumb are these people? So this logo has a lot of influence behind it. And it's because of the beliefs that people have about this logo and what this logo means. Now, what comes to your mind when you see this logo? And that's really what the American flag is. It is an emblem. It's a logo. It's a symbol. And that symbol has deep meaning within it that people are conditioned to believe what it means, what it stands for. So all the examples that I just showed you, we all have different experiences with them. And because of those different experiences, it means that we all have different references with these logos. And as we continuously have more references, we're conditioned to believe certain things about them. And our beliefs then determine how we perceive and how we think about them. So references over time leads to conditioned beliefs. And then our conditioned beliefs, and if you remember the diagram previously that we first introduced in Module 2, where purpose, beliefs, and values are at the top, which drives our mindset. Our mindset then determines what we focus on and what we think about, which then determines our behavior and actions, which ultimately determine our performance and results in life. This is very similar. So references are going to determine our beliefs. Our beliefs will determine our perception, and then our perception is ultimately going to drive what we think about something. And that's why everybody, when they see these different logos, they think different things, because they've all had and been conditioned differently based on their references. So the reason this is so important is you yourself have a brand. You have a brand and you have a reputation. And all of your friends, your colleagues, your family, everybody has been conditioned to believe certain things about you. If they believe that you're shy and timid, it's because they have references in their past experiences with you that tell them that you're shy and timid. Or if you're loud and outgoing, or you're very personable. Well, the reason they believe that is because you've conditioned them to believe that. And it's the exact same thing in the marketplace. In the marketplace, you must personally brand yourself for how you want to be perceived. And the most important thing to take away from this is your reputation professionally and your brand professionally, you control it. You can directly influence how you want other people to think about you. But in order to change how people think about you, you need to know and understand, how do you influence perception? How do you plant and condition references so that you're conditioning them to believe specific things about you? And that's we'll talk later about the importance of first impression and how massively that sets references for people. So how does Nike want to be perceived by the marketplace? Because immediately when you saw this logo earlier, certain thoughts came to your mind. But now ask yourself, well, how does Nike want to be perceived? So maybe some things that came to your mind were, well, they want to be perceived as the best. They want to be perceived as very high quality. They want to be perceived as working with the best athletes in the world. All those are true. And then how does McDonald's want to be perceived? So maybe some things that came to your mind is McDonald's wants to be perceived as very convenient, very easy, very inexpensive, and cheap food. And all those would be right as well. So crafting a brand in the marketplace is actually pretty difficult because people are different. Everybody who comes into contact with something, whether it's a logo or a business or a company, all of those people bring all their past experiences, all their past beliefs and their values with them. And so because people have different beliefs and values, they have different identities. And we talked about that in Module 2 as well. Your self-identity is nothing more than the combination of your beliefs and values. People's identities drive the three reasons why they go to the marketplace: to solve a problem, to advance an opportunity, and to fulfill a desire. Based on what you believe and what you value, you're going to have different problems in life. You're also going to pursue different opportunities, and you're going to have very different desires than other people based on your beliefs and values. So now think about who actually buys Nike products. Think through and try to describe those people in your mind. So maybe you think, well, most of the people who buy Nike are focused on fitness and they're athletes and they want high quality products. Usually they're willing to spend more money on the things that they care about. They focus on quality over price. But then there's also people who buy Nike, like Nike shoes, and they focus on luxury. They focus on status because Nike shoes are perceived as cooler shoes than, say, something like Skechers or other brands that might have a less status symbol. So those people are reasonably who buy Nike. But then think about, all right, well, who buys McDonald's? Try to describe those people in your mind. So maybe some of the things that came to your mind were people who maybe have less money and they're less affluent and they do need to buy cheaper food. Or maybe you thought of people who are constantly on the road all the time and need convenient fast food that's inexpensive. And maybe you thought of people who are just maybe don't care about their health as much. They don't care what they put into their bodies. They don't think about the trans fats or the highly processed foods that have stripped out all the micronutrients or the added preservatives and everything else that's wrapped up in those foods. So people who care less about their health and their nutrition and their diet and their fitness. So people who buy these products separately, so the people who buy Nike as compared to the people who buy McDonald's, they're very different types of people. And the people who buy Nike are going to share many different beliefs and values. And the people who buy McDonald's are also going to share many beliefs and values. And McDonald's and Nike understand that, and they know that. And Nike knows that not everybody is their customer. Not everybody is going to buy Nike. And similarly, McDonald's knows that not everybody's going to buy McDonald's. And so it would be a fool's game for them to try to market to everybody, because why would they waste valuable time and money and other resources to market to people who don't share the beliefs or the values that the company does? Well, those people are not going to buy their products. So for Nike, in terms of what do they believe and what do they value? Well, they value health, fitness, and appearance, because Nike does have designer, outfits. They want to look good while working out. So value health, fitness, and appearance. They're targeting people who are willing to spend money on nutrition and fitness, people who deeply care about their appearance and their style, people who also want top grade training equipment, people who are willing to spend quite a bit of money on their health and fitness. But this is the most important part, is Nike knows that their target market, their target audience, strongly values quality over price. That's the biggest takeaway. Nike values quality over price. Now, if you look at a company like McDonald's, which is really a low price based strategy, and Walmart would also fall in this category. And so McDonald's values convenience, speed, and low prices. And their target audience are people who spend money on convenience, people who are much less concerned about their appearance and much less concerned about their health, people who want cheap, fast, accessible food, people who are not willing to spend a lot of money on food. And the biggest strategy behind McDonald's and who they're targeting is McDonald's values price over quality. And so that is, you can see why Nike's strategy in terms of brand and reputation and their target audience, how polar opposite it is from McDonald's. Because again, Nike values quality over price, whereas McDonald's values price over quality. So companies must know their target audience and what the values and the beliefs are of their target audience in order to actually appeal to them, advertise to them, and also to actually get them to buy, to sell to them. And brand identity is ultimately what determines who buys their products or services. And so I hope from this example, you're clearly seeing how important brand identity is. And another example would be, think of what clothes do you wear? A lot of people, if they're very conscious of their clothing, well, someone who might buy, say, Gucci might be very, very different than someone who buys Patagonia or someone who buys Duluth, etc. And when people spend money on things, they're spending money on things that they believe in and things that they value because it's an extension of their identity. So how does a company actually think through this? How does a company determine a brand and how to brand itself? Well, they really start first with their target audience. Who is going to be buying our products? So they start usually with demographics. So where do they live? How much money are they making? Are they male? Are they female? Are we targeting both males and females? How old are the people that are most likely going to be buying our products or services? Are they single? Are they married? Are there kids? So these are just demographics. Think of these as core facts about their target audience. But after they think through demographics, then they need to think through psychographics. And psycho is mindset. So this is really heavily focusing on their target audience's beliefs and values. So what do they care about? Are they primarily focused on quality and they're willing to pay a lot more money? Or are they very cost conscious and they primarily focus on price over quality and they're willing to sacrifice quality for a good price? And is the target audience, are they focused on convenience? Or are they willing to do it yourself type of people where they're willing to put more time and energy into something? Are they focused on reputation and appearance? Or do they care less about that? What are their hobbies, their interests, their passions? So this is understanding the mindset of the person that they're actually going to be selling to. And once they understand the demographics and the psychographics, then they need to understand, okay, why are these people coming to the marketplace? What are their problems? What opportunities are they pursuing? And what are their desires? And this is what we touched on in Module 1 when we discussed why people come to the marketplace in the first place. So after a company understands their target audience's demographics and psychographics, as well as their pain points, their problems, as well as the opportunities and what their desires are, then they actually figure out, one, what do we want to sell to them? And then two, how do we need to position ourselves and brand ourselves so that we're communicating that we can solve your problems, we can advance your opportunities, we can fulfill your desires. And the company, during their advertising and their marketing campaigns, what they're doing is they're appealing to the beliefs and the values of their target audience, because that's what's going to create that relationship with their audience, and that's ultimately what's going to influence them to want to come and buy from them. So as an example, if we go back to that Dove case study that we talked about in Module 5 for strategic positioning. So their target audience, they had two different choices. Well, we can target men with dirty hands, or we can target women with dry skin who care about youth and beauty. And so the beliefs and values are, well, the women wanted to be young and beautiful with creamy and silky skin, and the men want to be manly, and they care about being rough or calloused hands and strong, but at the same time they wanted clean hands. So then, all right, well, what are the problems? Why do these people come to the marketplace? Well, the men with dirty hands, it was pretty simple. They were coming to the marketplace to buy soap because they wanted to get oil, grime, and dirt off their hands. That was it. So there's not a lot of subjective value in that. It's very objective. Just, yeah, I want clean hands. That's it. But if you think about the women, they wanted smoother, silkier, and most important, younger skin so they could be and would believe themselves to be more beautiful. Well, there's a lot more emotional value, a lot more subjective value in that second one. Beauty versus just clean hands is a huge difference. And so because of that, they believe that that's why the women were willing to pay such a premium for the soap and buy so much more of it, 19-1. Well, it's because that subjective value was there, whereas it wasn't there for the men who just wanted clean hands. So then Dove knew, okay, so if the women are willing to pay a premium for a soap that's going to smooth their skin and allow them to be more beautiful, we need to brand ourselves, especially with copy. And what copy is the words that you use that sell. So whenever you hear copywriting or marketing copy, anything like that, all copy means is which words are you using that will sell your product. And it's really the words that you use to communicate your brand. So I pulled two quotes from their copy, and you can see that they used sentences like, Dove creams your skin while you wash. So again, they're emphasizing to their target audience, which was women who want to be young and beautiful, they were emphasizing that Dove creams your skin. Okay. And then the second was, darling, I'm having the most extraordinary experience. I'm head over heels in Dove. Well, in this quote, what they're doing is they're playing on the beliefs and the values of, well, this woman is married, and that's why they're saying darling. And also they're playing on the love story. I'm head over heels in Dove. So you must follow the same process for your own personal brand in the marketplace, because you are a business, you are a service provider, and you need to write copy. You need to have a brand, and you need to sell yourself to the marketplace. So the marketplace, especially the job market, is flooded with terrible communication. Very, very few people understand how to brand themselves and how to communicate their professional brand and what they're capable of doing for a company, the skills, the knowledge, and the value propositions that they have to offer. So you can see here I've written little or no branding, cluttered messaging, and no value propositions. So most of the people are not communicating the messages to the companies as to how they can contribute value to the company. So this is where your opportunity comes in, because you're going to create a personal brand, which is going to set you apart and differentiate you from all the other people, or call it 95% plus of the other people that are interested in the target position that you're focused on. And not only are you going to have a brand, but you're then going to communicate that brand using the 3 channels, written and verbal communication, which is telling, work examples, which is showing, and then third-party communication, which is going to be your ability to receive referrals by building relationships through professional networking. So when we think about applying that same process to you, what that's going to look like is, well, your target audience, you know who your target audience is. It is the recruiters, the hiring managers, as well as the hiring team manager, whoever team you'll actually be on at these different companies. And you know that the beliefs and values are the company's mission and culture. So every single company has a mission statement or purpose statement or shared beliefs or core values of the company. Well, that's what the beliefs and values are of the company. So you know those or can research those. And also the problems, opportunities, and desires. You know why these companies are coming to the marketplace. They have an open seat and they've put out a job description communicating in detail what they need and what they're looking for. Now, you've already done all that research, and you've already chosen target companies. So now the last step for you to focus on is, how are you going to position yourself, which we talked about in Module 5, and then once you figured out how to position yourself, how are you going to create that personal brand and then communicate it? And that's really what we're focusing on here in Module 6, is this final part of the process. So your personal brand massively affects your first impression, and your first impression then massively affects your subjective value in the marketplace. So really quick example of how strongly a first impression can influence your value. So, have you ever seen this picture before? I love this picture because it is Bill Gates standing in line looking like a completely ordinary person. Anybody who did not know who Bill Gates was or what he looked like would have no idea that this is one of the richest men on earth, standing in a line, looking totally casual. And clearly, this guy has absolutely no idea that he's standing next to Bill Gates. But if this guy, so look at the guy with the red beanie, if he were to show up to this occasion, he might have a very different impression of Bill Gates. And the perceived value, the subjective value of Bill Gates in this guy's mind would be very different based on the environment that he sees Bill Gates in. And so this example is showing you that the objective value, which is Bill Gates didn't change. It's still the same person in both scenarios, but different perceived values because of the environment. So your self-presentation within an environment will determine your perceived value. And you're able to control your self-presentation on your resume, on your LinkedIn, on your cover letter, as well as when you're actually communicating with people over the phone, in video, and in person. So whether you're doing a phone screen or if you're doing a video chat or if you're actually in the office interviewing or meeting people, you still control how you present yourself, which means that you're setting the references that will determine what that person thinks about you and what they believe about you. Now, in terms of the environments that you're presenting yourself, you have social media platforms, so LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, and there's so many other different social media platforms now. But then also through online applications, emails, phone calls, video chats, and in-person meetings. Those are all different environments where you're presenting yourself to other people. So each impression that you make on someone will become a reference point in their mind about you. And what happens is later on, after you've set those reference points, when you pop up again later, or maybe they talk to you again or you reach out again later, they recall the references that they had with you previously in order to recall and remember what they believe and think about you. And that's why your first impression is so important, because it becomes the standard. It becomes the baseline for what that person believes about you. So as a super simple example, imagine if you were to go on a date and you completely blow up the date. It goes horribly. You spill wine or spaghetti or something on the person on the other side of the table. Well, that person probably doesn't have a good standard or baseline of you. The first impression, that first date, you blew it. And from then on, that person, whenever they think about you, is going to think about that experience. Oh, he or she was an idiot. They spilled wine on me. They dumped spaghetti all over my lap. They're probably not going to go on a second date with you. But once someone believes something about you, they become biased. And that's human nature. That's how our minds work. Once we've been told what to believe, or we've been conditioned to believe something because of references, from that point on, we become biased. Cognitive bias. So, just to visually show how important this is, let's put this on a chart. So let's say the top bar is the best possible perception. Someone is just over, they think you are the greatest thing to ever walk the earth. And then the bottom is a really bad perception. So they think you are the worst person to walk the earth. They never want to talk to you. They never want to see you again. And then the middle is someone who literally doesn't even know you. They're completely indifferent about you. They've never seen you, never heard about you. They don't have any beliefs or values that resonate with you or that are about you. So now let's say that you have an experience with someone and your first impression is a bad first impression. Well, if you start off with a bad first impression with someone, that person is going to believe, and that becomes the standard for them, which means that consistently going forward from that point on, they're going to try to confirm their bias. Because they had a bad first impression, so they think, oh, that guy's a jerk, or he's an idiot, or that girl is full of herself, and she's very selfish. Well, if you have that bias, then going forward in the future, whether it's the guy or the girl, you're going to be trying to confirm those beliefs that you have about that guy or girl, which means that you've now become negatively biased because of confirmation bias, which we talked about in an earlier module. But even more importantly is because this person has a negative confirmation bias about you, it also becomes much harder to improve your perception in that person's eyes. Because people hate being wrong. People don't like to be wrong. So once they think something about someone else or about something else, they're constantly trying to prove to themselves that they're right because they don't want to change their mind. People don't like changing their minds. People hate being wrong. So the opposite also works in your favor. If you set a very good first impression with someone, they become positively biased. And they look for all the benefits in you. They look for the positive characteristics, the positive personality traits in you. And they might overlook other things that are bad. And so it actually becomes a lot harder to damage your perception in that person's eyes because they are positively confirmation biased. So first impression is super, super important. And first impression also leads to something called the halo effect. So what the halo effect means is it's a tendency for an impression created in one area to influence opinion in another area. And as an example of a halo effect is, let's say, and they've actually done studies on this, where when they looked at job applicants and people most likely to get a job offer, one of the biases was weight. Someone who's healthy and attractive or fit and attractive, well, statistically, they get job offers over people who are unhealthy. Now, the question is morally, that doesn't affect someone's ability to do the job cognitively. Just because someone's out of shape or unhealthy doesn't mean that they can't do the job. So why were the interviewers biased? Well, it turns out they were biased because what they were doing is they were using, subconsciously, they didn't even know that they were doing this, but the halo effect was taking place. So they interviewed this person who was attractive, whether male or female, who was healthy and vibrant and probably energetic. And immediately they took that as, well, this person's smarter and harder working and more opportunity for upward mobility and their ability to lead other people, to energize other people. Well, just because someone is healthy and fit has nothing to do with any of those other categories, any of those other areas. Just because someone's healthy and attractive doesn't mean that they're smart or can do the job better than someone who's not. And so that was a perfect example of a halo effect. They used one area, which was health and attractiveness, and it influenced their opinion on a completely unrelated area, which was intelligence, leadership, etc. So another way to think about this is if you ever come into contact with someone and you walk away just with a really strong, good, positive impression of someone, like, he just seemed really smart, or he just had everything put together. Well, some people call that presence. That person had a really good presence. Or maybe they say, that woman had a really strong level of confidence, and I could see her doing really big things. That's halo effect. So a halo effect is really positive perceptions create positive expectancies. When someone sees or believes something positive about you, in their mind, what they're doing is they're painting a brighter future about what you're capable of doing. First impression is so important. So, how does this all apply to your specific career and even more specifically, your career advancement? Well, for many professionals, the very first impression is LinkedIn. And think of LinkedIn kind of like Facebook or Instagram. When someone asks, hey, do you know so-and-so? One of the very first things that we all do is we immediately go and we search that person on Facebook, Instagram, or any other social media platform, and we look them up to figure out, one, what do they look like? Because that's what human beings do. We always want to know what people look like. But then two, we want to have an idea of who this person is. Maybe we do know them. Maybe we don't. Without us knowing it, by looking at their Facebook or Instagram, it instantly sets our impression of them. That's because that becomes our first impression. Similarly, in the professional world, people look people up on LinkedIn because why wouldn't they? They want to see what you look like. That's human curiosity, but also they want to know your background and professionally how you present yourself. Well, that LinkedIn profile is going to set the anchor. That sets the first impression. Well, then usually LinkedIn then leads to networking. So let's say that, and we'll talk about this in the networking module, but when you reach out to people, before people get back to you, they're going to look you up. They're going to want to see what you look like. They're going to want to see your background. So networking is actually influenced by your LinkedIn because people aren't going to respond to you until they've most likely already looked you up. And they usually look you up on LinkedIn first. So LinkedIn becomes the first impression, which then leads to networking. And your experience networking with someone is going to create more references about telling that person and communicating to that person what to believe about you. Well, continued networking is going to lead to relationships, which is going to have more references. And eventually you're going to go into the actual application process, whether through referral or online applications or the two other means, which we'll talk about later on. But then once you're in the process, well, then your written communication. So your resume, your cover letter, as well as any emails that you exchange with the people within the company. And then you have your interview. And the interview is how do you present yourself and communicate the value that you have to offer, as well as your past experiences. Well, again, you're setting and anchoring more references. And then eventually, assuming that you get the offer, you're going to have the opportunity to negotiate the offer, which again is setting more references. Now, the reason this is so important is you benefit from the subjective value that you've built over this entire period of time. You benefit from that built subjective value, that built perceived value during the interview stage and during the offer negotiation stage. And the reason for that is if you interview extremely well and the interviewing people, so whether that's the recruiter or the hiring manager or the team manager, etc., if they really like you and they really want you on the team, you're going to have more opportunity to negotiate because they're going to be more flexible. You're going to have more leverage when speaking with them. And the more leverage you have, the more opportunity you have to ask for more money or to ask for a signing bonus or to ask for a moving bonus or compensation or to ask for more stock or more equity, something. So the more subjective value you have, the more you can negotiate both your internal success, whether that's internal promotion, a title raise, etc., or compensation and benefits. So, how do we actually go about creating your professional brand? Well, we've already talked about positioning. Now we're going to take that positioning and focus on the personal brand. So, the strategy behind your personal brand is you're going to need to figure out what titles do I want to brand myself with. You're going to need to create a hook statement, and we'll talk about what that is. And you're also going to need to craft 3 value propositions, which are, what value are you communicating to your target audience that I bring this to the table? And I know that these are important to you. So you're going to use this personal branding for both your written communication, which is going to be your resume, your LinkedIn, and cover letters / emails, as well as your verbal communication, which is when you're actually talking to people, whether over the phone, over a video chat or a video interview, or when you're actually in person with them. And that's going to be networking, interviewing, and negotiating. So I want to show you some examples of personal branding. So here you have an example of someone who had a background in corporate real estate, and they wanted to brand themselves as not just a financial analyst, but also a business analyst. And the reason he chose these 2 titles was the position that he was targeting was a business process improvement position within a real estate company, within a real estate investment company. So he knew that he needed to communicate the fact that not only am I a financial analyst, but I also understand business processes. And I've previously sort of been an internal consultant, streamlining processes, creating efficiencies, and saving the company money. So those were his 2 titles, financial analyst and business analyst. Now, if he had only gone with financial analyst and someone looked him up and all they saw was financial analyst, well, that would change how they think about him. But because he had both financial analyst and business analyst, that added some additional flavor. That added an additional sense of impression or belief that someone has about them. And we'll show other examples that make this clear. But so then he had a hook statement, which is the first bullet point. So that first bullet point, he said, finance professional with 2+ years of financial analysis, process improvement, and corporate budgeting. Well, he had 2+ years, so we wanted to get that out there, that I do have 2 years of experience. But even more importantly, he chose those words, financial analysis, process improvement, and corporate budgeting. The reason he chose those 3 was he knew his target audience was focused on those 3 things. So he wanted to communicate that loud and clear. And then the purpose of the hook statement is to capture attention. This is going to be the first thing that someone reads on your resume. They're going to see this and immediately decide within 3 seconds whether or not they want to continue reading. So immediately he caught their attention. I have 2 years of experience, which was check mark. Okay, we're looking for that. And he said financial analysis, process improvement, corporate budgeting. They're looking for that. Check. And then if they read under that, so responsible for $230 million in budget across an investment portfolio of 56 commercial real estate properties. Well, that's interesting. How does someone with only 2 years of experience, how are they managing a $230 million budget across a portfolio of 56 commercial real estate properties? That's pretty nuts. That's wild. So immediately that captures attention. But notice it doesn't describe in detail how or why or anything like that. The purpose of this hook statement is just to capture attention and keep them reading. So then you have the next 3 bullet points. These are the value propositions. So his first value proposition was, I'm a strategic problem solver, combining business and financial analysis with operational best practices. And then he gave evidence that showed I've been able to do this in the past. Here's my proof. I saved 600+ hours annually and improved $52 million plus in capital expenditure allocation processes. So that was his example or evidence that backed up the claim that I have this to offer. And then his second value proposition was, I'm a detailed analyst, leveraging data analysis and visualization to generate data-driven insights. And he knew they were looking for that. So then he backed that up again with more evidence saying, tested, presented, and implemented 2 KPI analyses and a reporting software program improving decision making. So again, more evidence that he actually has done this in the past. And then his last value proposition was excellent communicator, written and verbal, with strong relationship building skills. Again, he backed it up with examples. Led recommendations to C-suite executives, managed cross-functional projects, and trained and developed 3 financial analysts. So the main part behind this career summary is this is his personal brand. And sometimes recruiters or hiring managers, this may be the only thing that they read on your resume. And after they read this, they know whether or not they want to talk to you. Because if you hit it smack on with exactly what they're looking for in terms of their needs, problems, and desires, the 3 most important qualities that they're looking for, well, boom, you hit that with your 3 value propositions and you've captured their attention with your background, with your hook statement, they're going to want to talk to you. They're going to invite you to that first phone call, that first phone screen. So another example. So a senior financial analyst, strategic investments analyst. Now immediately, before you even read anything else on the slide, senior financial analyst, strategic investments analyst. What do you have in your mind? Because those 2 titles alone brand this person and paints a specific picture in your mind. What their skills are, what they understand, what their knowledge is, most likely what their experiences are. So now, looking at the hook statement, finance professional with 2+ years of financial modeling, business development, and problem solving. Okay, so now we know the 3 most important things that they want to communicate to their target audience is I have 2 years of experience, and the 3 major areas of skills and knowledge that I have is financial modeling, business development, and problem solving. Okay, well, how did this person capture interest? Well, he wrote, led $100 million plus in annual COGS reduction initiative across $1.2 billion of services, modeled $11.5 trillion in international currency flows, and reduced $25 million in yearly account reconciliation costs with robotic process automation. So that's going to capture a lot of attention. Recruiters are going to read that and go, wow, how, who, what is this person's background? Because I need to learn more. Then, what are the 3 value propositions? Well, he wrote, creative and data-driven strategist, leveraging research and analytics to identify trends and opportunities. He backed it up with evidence, saying, develop strategic investment theses totaling $6.1 million, identified $10 million plus opportunity in networking capital efficiencies, and created 7 macroeconomic trend reports on competitors and launched an internal AI chatbot. Okay, well, that's an example of how he's been creative and used data in order to make better decisions. The second value proposition was cross-functional communicator experienced in presenting strategic recommendations to senior leaders. So, communication. Examples and evidence he used to back that claim up was pitch strategic acquisition and partnership targets for voice-enabled neurolinguistic programming, natural language processing technology, NLP, interviewed 20+ senior leaders, partnered with engineering leaders, and led communications across 120+ engineering teams. And then his third value proposition was a computer scientist with deep understanding of technology use in finance. So I'm not going to read through all of these examples word for word, but I hope you're starting to get a feel of what a title does, and the titles are communicating literally in a very short number of words who you are, what your background is, what you want that person to think about you. Then your hook statement is going to give a background snapshot of how many years of experience do I have and what experience do I have, what areas of experience do I have. And then you want to capture their attention with your most interesting or most impressive quantitative or qualitative value contributions that you've had in the past. Then the next 3 bullet points are going to be value propositions. What are you communicating that you bring to the table? These are your 3 sales points. And then you're going to back up those sales points with evidence, which is exactly what you did with your strategic positioning worksheet at the end of Module 5, strategic positioning. So another example is someone who was previously working within banking, but they wanted to move into venture capital. Well, the 2 titles used were investment banking analyst and venture-backed startup advisory, because he had a little bit of experience through his banking experience with VCs. So he wanted to include that in the title because immediately that would capture interest. So his hook was investment banking professional with 2+ years of valuation and M&A experience. And then his 3 value propositions: strategic market and industry researcher, originating investment opportunities in ag tech. And then second value proposition, excellent written and verbal communicator with strong negotiation and presentation skills. Third value prop was creative problem solver using financial modeling, data analysis, and valuations to generate recommendations. He knew that those 3 value propositions would directly aligned with what his target audience was looking for. So now here's a merchandise planner, or a planner within it was a retail company. And so this is how she branded herself. Well, the titles that she used were planner, buyer, and merchandise strategy. Her hook was results-driven retail professional with 3+ years of planning, financial, and marketing strategy. And then she included some very impressive numbers about her background that captured a lot of interest. And then her 3 value propositions that she knew her target audience wanted were: 1, strategic, analytical, and creative problem solver; 2, a data-driven decision maker who leverages historical and in-season performance to advise plans; and 3, excellent written and verbal communicator, skilled in presenting, influencing, and collaborating with others. So those 3 were what her target audience was looking for, and she backed up all 3 of those with evidence. Now another example. So this was someone who was a marketing manager. So the hook, or titles, starting with titles, so marketing manager as well as growth marketing manager. Now, if you look at this, you might think, well, what's the difference? They're both marketing managers. His target audience was SaaS-based companies, software as a service technology companies. And many of the technology companies differentiate between marketing managers and growth marketing managers. And the idea behind growth marketing manager is someone who knows how to accelerate and work with very fast-growing companies, primarily technology companies. So he needed to brand himself also as a growth marketing manager so that he would pop up and directly align with what he knew that his target audience was looking for. So his hook statement was marketing professional with 4+ years of digital and traditional marketing experience. He backed that up with very impressive claims, or very impressive achievements from his past that capture attention. And then his 3 value propositions: 1 was creative and experimental content creator, copywriter, and industry collaborator. He knew that his target audience wanted someone who could create content. And then the second value proposition was data-driven strategist who uses analytics and research to align marketing efforts with business goals. He knew that his target audience wanted someone not just who's good at creating content, but someone who also knows how to leverage technology and actually track all the marketing data and the analytics, and then actually generate insights to improve marketing campaigns. So then he backed that up with examples. And then his 3rd value proposition was relationship-driven communicator focused on customer experience and storytelling. Because again, his target audience wanted someone who understood relationship building, communication, and storytelling. So he created that as this 3rd value prop and then backed that up with evidence. So another example. So this is someone who I had worked with who was very senior in her career, had been extraordinarily successful, and she was moving on to, she wanted a position with more purpose. She wanted to have a more deeper alignment with the mission of the company, and she was someone who was making a lot of money but wanted something more purposeful. Well, she had to completely think back through the last 15 years because she had been with the company a long time. And so she needed to create a resume and everything from scratch. And so she went through this exact same process. Well, she titled, because this was her background, so she titled as Global Operations, Procurement, and Process Improvement Executive. So anybody who looked at her background, or anybody who immediately saw her LinkedIn or resume, the very first thing that they read was this title. They immediately know, all right, here's a global executive who is primarily focused on procurement, operations, supply chain. That's how immediately, just by reading the title, they knew that was her background. So then her hook statement: seasoned executive with 24+ years of operations, procurement, and process improvement experience. And then she backed it up with her most impressive achievements, or most impressive facts about her background, which were managed a $300 million plus budget. She grew revenues by 250% over 9 years, which is a 10.7% compounded annual growth rate. That is phenomenal. And this was a pretty mature company. To grow a company by 10.7% is insane. So that immediately caught a lot of people's attention and wanted, sometimes just by that number alone, the 10.7% CAGR, some recruiters and managers wanted to talk to her just because of that one number. And she had it first and foremost on her resume, on her LinkedIn, everything. Captured a lot of interest. And then led 175 plus employees across North America, Europe, India, developed 50 plus customer relationships, including Ford, GM, Faurecia, Kraft, Delphi, Abbott Labs, Energizer, Johnson Controls, Bobcat, and more. So that was how she really captured people's attention. Then she had 3 value propositions: strategic and creative process improvement expert, procurement systems and processes subject matter expert, or SME, and then her third value prop was relationship-driven leader, mentor, and communicator. She knew that for the chief operating officer or a VP of operations or many of those other roles, those were the 3 main things that they were looking for. They wanted someone who was extremely good at putting together processes and improving processes. They wanted someone who was an expert in supply chain management, and they also wanted someone who was an expert at leading teams and building a culture. So those were her 3, and then she backed that up with evidence. So now, as an example of an engineer, now if you're going through this program, your background is most likely business, but I have worked with people who were not business professionals, and this works the exact same thing for them. So this was someone who was an automotive engineer with a mechanical engineering background. So same thing. All right, what are your titles? How do you want to brand yourself? Well, project engineer, automotive engineer, mechanical engineer. His hook statement was automotive engineer with 2+ years of dynamometer testing, data acquisition, and analysis. He backed that up with some of his most impressive feats. Then he had 3 value propositions: data-driven and analytical engineer with experience testing, analyzing, and validating vehicle components. Innovative and creative problem solver, experienced in design and root cause analysis. And the third value prop was excellent communicator and presenter, experienced in leading internal and external relationships. So these are all different examples of how to go about creating a professional brand. And now what I want to show you is the branding worksheet that you're going to be working through in order to brainstorm and come up with your personal brand. So you can see here that this is what the worksheet looks like, and I'll zoom in here a little bit. All right, so you can see that you're going to start off with your hook statement, and I've reiterated what that hook statement is, and I've also included several of those examples that we just went through on the slides. So the results-driven retail professional, 3+ years of planning, financial marketing strategy, finance professional, etc., etc. And then the senior executive example is down here as well. So once you've done that and gone through that, then you're going to want to write your own hook statement. So you're going to come up with your own hook statement, and you want to start off with, well, your experience and what that experience is in. Categorize the experience, the knowledge, the skills, etc. And again, you can see how these are laid out here. So finance professional with 2+ years. Okay, 2+ years of experience doing what? Well, he knows that the experience he needs to communicate to his target audience is that I have experience in financial modeling, business development, and problem solving, because that's what they were looking for. So that was his lead part, his bolded part, bolded and italicized part, and then he backed it up with evidence. I'm sorry, for the hook statements, you're backing up with the most impressive feats or achievements that you've had from your past. Because again, the purpose of the hook statement is it's just to capture attention. It's for them to read this hook statement and go, wow, I need to learn more about this person. I'm gonna keep reading. I need to read the next few bullet points, as well as probably start to look at this person's professional experience, because just on this one statement alone, I'm interested. So that's the purpose of the hook statement. So you're gonna craft your own hook statement there. And then you're going to want to think through the 3 value propositions. Now, again, remember here, so reference your strategic positioning worksheet. So in Module 5, the last worksheet that you worked on in Module 5 was your strategic positioning worksheet, where you had the 3 most important qualities that you know that your target audience is looking for. And then you laid out what supporting evidence do I have that supports the fact that I have that quality. So for the most important quality number 1 and the evidence that you have backing that up, well, you're going to use that to craft your first value proposition. And I've included down here examples again for the previous ones, the value proposition examples. So number 1, and then you're going to do the exact same thing for value proposition number 2. So you're going to go back to that worksheet from module 5, the strategic positioning worksheet, and say, okay, the most important quality number 2 is this. How am I going to present myself in this second value proposition that I bring that quality that they're looking for? And then what evidence or achievements do I have that back that up? And then you're going to do the exact same thing with a third value proposition, where you're going to look at the most important quality number 3. You're going to think through, how can I communicate that I bring that to the table? And then what evidence, so achievements, what evidence, so achievements, experience, skills, knowledge, or credibility, what can you include that backs that statement up? So this is what you're going to be focusing on following this video. So again, leverage the work you've already done. Don't try to rethink through everything. You've already done a lot of this brainstorming. You've already worked through so many different worksheets in order to come up and strategically think through all this. So make sure to use the worksheets from module 5. And then go ahead and get started on this. And that's all I have for part 1. And then in part 2, we're going to dive into the resume. So go ahead and get started, and I'll see you in part 2.